Hey everyone, Curse Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted. And right now we've got Nahiri the Lithomancer, Stax, and Equipment. This deck comes to us from Anonymous, who says, I'm mostly curious in getting a more critical set of eyes on the deck. I'm happy with how it performs as it stands. And they're not looking for any cards, they're $50 or more. We're going to do our best to kind of stay within that parameter. So before we get to it, I recommend you go into the video description and open up and take a look at this deck yourself. And while you're in there, if you've got a deck list to submit to me, there's a link in there. And if you'd like to ensure that your deck list is the next one I work on, there's a link in there too. So who is Nahiri the Lithomancer, and why are we using them as our Stax equipment commander? So Nahiri says is a planeswalker that can be used as a commander. She's 5 mana. She comes in with 3 loyalty. Her +2 is to create a 1/1 core and attach a piece of equipment to it immediately. Her -2 is to put an equipment card from our hand or graveyard onto the battlefield, just making sure it's hand or graveyard. And then finally, she's got a -10 that creates the Stoneforge Blade, which is an indestructible piece of equipment that equips for 0, gives +5/+5, and double strike. She is good for an equipment commander. She was built to be mono white. This was a set of commanders they made a long time ago that are all just straightforwardly mono white and can be commanders. Nahiri it was for a really long time kind of seen as one of the weaker ones, with I believe Teferi being the strongest one. But I think she's particularly strong. As the time has gone by, we have gained more and more equipment to make it work. Anonymous here notes that the main idea is that if we are able to lock down the game by destroying all the lands or using static orb or just otherwise use a bunch of cards that really kind of mess up our opponent's ability to play the game, all of a sudden we get to go and uptick Nahiri, get card advantage, cheat on mana costs with her -2, and just basically put ourselves into a position that even if everything else is locked down, we're still able to attack, we're still able to move forward. I like this strategy. I think it's a very good strategy. The deck itself is built very, very well. I have a few things I want to point out about it, but they're not too important, and I have a few suggestions which once again can come or go. Overall, the deck is good. So let's take a look at the curve, which is on the right here, good old tapped out. And we can see the curve goes to 8. I believe that 8 is Vanquish the Horde, which is not an 8 mana spell, much like our Blasphemous Act. But otherwise, we end up at 7, and 7 is Cauldron Complete, which we aim to cheat, or Elish Norn. Then we kind of go down generally, and we get stuck at 3 being our highest one. At our five mana cards, we have a few cards here that I might want to talk about that kind of conflict with our commander, but generally I think we want to play Nahiri first, but we will get to those cards very much so soon. So the first thing I want to note a little bit before we get any further, for people who are unaware of Stax, Stax is sometimes a bit of a controversial deck archetype, where the main goal is to lock the game out and win through that lock. A lot of frustration people have with Stax is sometimes they get the impression that someone is just going to cast Armageddon for 4 mana, destroy all lands, have nothing to win the game, and people have to, go through the slow and painful rebuild only for it to maybe happen again, only for it to kind of like settle in a way they don't particularly like. The idea being that if you destroy all the lands, you're basically resetting the game. I'm going to argue that's not the case, and I would like people to have maybe a bit more of an open mind towards Stacks. The idea of Stacks is twofold, about winning with Stacks, I should say, is you're either building a board state where when you Armageddon and knock all the lands out of play, that you're going to be able to win from that board state, and that's the one that no one seems to have a problem with. They seem to get the impression that if you can explain to your opponents how you're going to win over the next few games, they can concede in peace. But the alternative idea is that even if you don't have immediate ways to win the deck, you've built your deck in a way that you can take advantage of the fact that everyone's behind and be the first to rebuild or rebuild in a way that is much more beneficial to you. So, for example, if someone were to, on their fifth turn, Armageddon, let's say the board is not that impressive, no one really cares what's going on, they Armageddon, destroy all lands, play a Plains, and play Esper Sentinel. Well, that Esper Sentinel is not going to win them the game, but there's a high chance it'll create enough advantage while your opponents are struggling to get back into the game to propel you into the next half of the game, right? That's something that I would consider a win condition. And there are a lot of other kind of examples of this, and I think they'll come and go, but I think it's important just to consider that if your opponent blows up all the lands and they don't even have anything in play, I don't think you need to get mad at them. What you need to do is think about, well, do I want to continue playing this game? And maybe there's a bit of a feels bad that you are conceding to an Armageddon even though you haven't lost the game. But not wanting to play the game is a very reasonable reason to concede out of a game. There is no shame in letting the scam, my goodness, I'm used to playing scam and having this argument thrown at me, but there's no shame in letting the Stax player just win the game with an Armageddon. That's fine. Just shovel up and start again. So don't be too mad about it. Let it go and just play a new game. That's my general advice, but I know that always starts arguments, so I just wanted to put it out there. So with these cards, we're aiming to get back. So the first thing I want to talk about this deck that I feel is kind of interesting because I think we should improve it is it does feel like we're low on lands. We have 34 lands. We have, let's see, where are the artifacts? We have Soul Ring as our only real, mana production. We have a few kind of things like Smothering Tide. We have land tax to, you know, if our opponent ramps, which is possible, right? Or if we're not first, right? We can draw the rest of the lands, which is really, really good. But it does feel we're kind of behind on land production. We have a few kind of backup land things, but even then, it is tricky for us to hit 5 mana with only 34 lands. I wouldn't mind to go at least to 36, maybe 37. Considering we want to cast land destruction spells, having a larger collection of lands would be really, really nice. Yes, you are playing Flagstones. Okay, so with that in mind, I think it's definitely worth just upping the land count a little bit. Then looking around, there's a few cards that kind of stick out. Let's see. So Kataki War's Wage can either be really, really good or really, really bad for you. Some of these cards are like this. Hushbringer is like this too. But these two, Hushbringer and Kataki, feel like they're the ones that are the most hurtful for the deck. Whereas Hushbringer, I'm willing to let it go because I do play Mono White Hammer Time in Modern, and I used to play Hushbringer in there, even though I had Stoneforge Mystics, and I found that it was worth it. And I think in Commander as well, it is worth it. Hushbringer is one of those Stax pieces that you really underestimate how good it is because you play against Blink decks and you shut them out, and you play against Aristocrats deck and you shut them out. So I think it's worth it, even though it cuts out a few of our abilities. However, Kataki feels trickier because Kataki not only introduces attacks on our equipment, which is the main way our deck kind of interacts with our creatures, but it also puts an attacks onto like our static orb, which has been noted as one of the ways we win the game. So it just feels out of place. I feel like depending on your meta, it can be really, really good, but I think the chances of it hurting you more than your opponents is pretty high. Now you might say, Curse Deck Builder, just don't cast it then. It's just in your head, just a hand, just don't cast it. Well, that's not really good advice because you do need to play to the board and develop and have something to attach your equipment with. And I'm sure with Kataki in your deck, there's going to be scenarios that you're going to play Kataki and then attach swords of, like, let's say, Hearth and Home to it. It's not ideal, but you'll do it because you need something to attach the swords to get some advantage. And I want to avoid that as much as I can. I'd rather just have Kataki out. Lion Sash also feels a little clunky. It's very much on theme, don't get me wrong, but it's one of those equipment cards that, like, I was really excited for. People were like, hey, it's white scavenging ooze that works with, you know, white's main utility, like main color utility of equipment. That's really, really cool. And the longer it's been around, the less I've been impressed with it. It seems to be just okay. In order to actually do something against certain like graveyard strategies, you have to put a lot of white mana into it. Don't get me wrong, it can be really good against someone who's entombing a creature and then immediately reanimating it. But even then, like they can do it on a turn you don't have white mana up. You don't have an infinite amount of white mana, or they can just remove the Lion Sash. So they're not forced to kind of deal with it. Sorry, they're not forced to play into it. Whereas decks that rely on, let's say, mill or other like uncontrollable ways to mass put cards into your graveyard, well, this is also not good against that. In fact, it's just okay against that because once again, you're held back by your white mana. And for this in mind, I'm wondering why we're not playing Rest in Peace. You might say Nahiri and a few other cards reanimate your equipment, and so Rest in Peace is a nombo, but we've already seen that this deck is willing to hurt itself in order to have good Stax effects. And one of the strongest Stax effects in Commander is Rest in Peace. So all in all, Lion Sash feels weird. I do get we get to tutor for it, but some of our tutors all like, for example, Enlightened Tutor would also get Rest in Peace. So I'm not too impressed. Going down here, Redain feels weird. I get that we're playing it for the other side of Valkmir, probably. Valkmira. But even then, I don't think that's good. Let's read Redain again. Yeah, I just don't think this card does enough. I think this is just weird. I have a substitution for the card as a suggestion. I just, to be honest, the Flying Vigilance is nice to put equipment on, but otherwise, I mean, if you want that, you have Archon of Emeria, which is just much, much better. So I don't particularly like Redain. Welcoming Vampire is very good. Battle Angels of Tyr. I'm going to have to read this. Okay, so 4/4 for 4 Flying Myriad. When it deals combat damage, draw a card if that player has more cards than you, then create a treasure if that player controls more lands than you, then gain 3 life if that player has more life than each other player. Oh, it's each other player. It's not you. I assumed it was you. Okay, this card is awful. Don't play this card. I will say, for what it's worth, it does end games quickly, and I do like that. For a while, I had a deck that played the Sarah Angel with Myriad, or 5 mana 4/4, and it just has Myriad and Vigilance. And this is better because it's one less mana, and it does beat down for 12 every turn. So I do really like it, don't get me wrong. I guess its effect just feels okay. And the fact that the Myriads don't get the equipment that's attached to this is a little worse. I wish it had, but it doesn't, and therefore it feels just okay. If this card is mainly being played as a beater, I think it could be good. But otherwise, remember that you can only get one of one of each of the abilities. You can only get one card, one treasure, 3 life. You can't get multiples. And the thing that makes that weird is you won't get these if you have the most cards or if these things are tied, right? If two players have 5 lands, this does nothing because they don't have more than each other. And then if they have both 5 cards in hand, you also don't draw even if you have one card because they don't have more than each other. So I really, really don't like this card. Uh, if you were playing it in an Angel deck where beating down was really important, I think I would really like this. But here, it's not the same thing. Elginord is sweet. I don't know how you're going to sacrifice 3 other creatures. I guess the core. Yeah, I guess that's fine. I still don't know if I love it. I think it's really hard to flip her, and then when you do flip her, she's really, really good. But I don't know if I love it. Halvar is great. Keeper of the Accord also feels like it definitely is better than the Angels, but I don't like this card. I saw it as one of those cards that like people were like, this is gonna be so good, and then I've just never seen it see play. You know, it's just it's just okay. Getting a 1/1 each turn if your opponents control more creatures, I don't see that happening a lot considering you have a token producer as a commander and you're taxing their ability to play to the board well. I don't know how often you're going to get a 1/1. And the thing is that that's not a good deal, right? The second part is really good, right? That's the main reason you're playing it. If your opponents have more lands than you get extra planes. I do like that. It's 4 mana, so I don't consider it necessarily ramp. It's more, or like, I wouldn't consider it as ramp to get to Nahiri because you got to get to 4 first. And you get to 4, getting to 5 is not that bad, but getting to 4 is tough. But late game, it gives you an extra planes each turn that can be good. They come tapped, which means it doesn't work with the orb. It's okay. The second ability is the main reason you're playing it, and it's okay. So I'm not going to be too hard on that part. But the first part is that if your opponents have more creatures than you get a 1/1. That's awful. Nobody cares. I get that we can attach equipment to it, but like, wouldn't you attach the equipment to this guy instead? Like, if that's the option, if it's this guy and a soldier? I just think that first ability is just not going to be very good. Even if you create 3/1/1s, like the idea of token producers is that you will eventually outnumber your opponents, and this literally cannot do that. So, with that in mind, I don't think I don't like this card. I like it. I really don't. But we'll move on. Lidvala is very good, very easy. Sarah Paragon is interesting. Once again, a card that was supposed to be really good, but then I never saw it see play. I will leave it up to you because I do think it's very strong here, and so I think it's good, so we should keep it, but at times I'm unsure. Guardian Scale Lord feels weird. Like, why this card? It's the same mana as our commander, which I don't like. It has a very specific ability that our commander already kind of has. It's power based, which is not very good with the majority of our white creatures, but most of our mana, our white creatures are pretty low mana, and same with our artifacts, so we're not too mad about that, so we can get them back. But since we can't really mill our cards into our graveyard, we're really just relying on the fact that they've naturally gone into there. And I guess the idea is this can always get a land back, but I swear we can do better, right? Like this is such a weird mix of abilities that I don't particularly like that I don't know. I don't really see this card. I don't think it should be here. Stonehitter Giant is fine, but this is search the no, this isn't as weird. Okay, I was thinking of it also like Stoneforge, where you want to cast it first and then get Nahiri. No, this is great. This is fine. No problem. It does have the problem that obviously it needs to be removed. If it gets removed immediately, it is pretty weak. But in a deck like this, I don't think you mind that as much. And then I think the rest are generally good. I don't really have a lot more to say because I think the rest of the deck is generally very good. Excise the Imperfect. I don't know if this is better than Generous Gift. I get that it exiles, but it doesn't hit lands. And at the power level this deck is playing with, I think I want to hit the lands, so I think I would prefer Generous Gift. I'll leave that to you to decide. I know it's really close, but because you're already kind of, you know, you're playing Stax, so the ability to use Generous Gift to destroy lands is pretty good. So I do like that a little better here. All right, rest of the stuff is good. Like it very much. Blind Obedience, actually, I'll pause and say Blind Obedience. I don't know if it's going to do that much in comparison to all of your other Stax pieces. So it does seem like the weaker side. And I do get the benefit of getting a little bit of a breath um, while your opponents are getting ahead. Sorry, my brain just stopped. It does stop them from pressuring you while you set up, but I don't know if that's as good as just playing out some of your creatures that do kind of the same thing, either defensively or proactively. I don't know. I don't really like it. All right, let's see. How are we on time? All right. let's go and take a look at some of the cards I have to suggest. I don't have too many. I have some equipment I'd like to suggest and a few Stax cards I'd like to suggest, but none of this is too integral. So, Pure Steel Paladin feels notably missing. Same thing with SRAM. And I recognize part of the reason these cards are missing is that our equipment package is actually not that large. And SRAM only benefits cast. So if we're not going to play SRAM, Pure Steel Paladin feels good enough because it's ETB. So that cards like Nahiri returning equipment back to the battlefield, or Forge Anew, or anything else like that can be really good with Pure Steel Paladin. The free equip is very relevant. I think it definitely should be in the deck. It's gone down in price considerably. Look at that. It is $1 American. You can definitely play that card. Then let's look at a few equipment cards that I think. Oh no, one more equipment creature. Kemba Ka Enduring. I don't know. I know this is not the kind of deck that wants this ability, but something I do really like is how it kind of does what your commander does. Like it is kind of a stand-in for your commander, at least half of it, in the sense that this is like a stand-in for the plus, right? Kemba comes in, and I will switch to my favorite art though, actually. Where are you? There we go. Kemba comes in and attaches an equipment to itself, and then serves as a mana sink to put 2/2 cats in and equip creatures to it. Now, this is a bit silly, right? Because you might say, well, Cursed, it's 5 mana to do this ability, whereas it's 5 mana to cast my commander, who has that ability as an uptick from that point on. I get that. I get that. It's not a good comparison. This is good as a card that you play for the first half. You know, you play this, you attach a sword to it, you're pretty happy. And then if your commander gets hated out of the game, gets pithing needled and you can't deal with it, you're playing at higher levels and stacks, people will be hating down your commander. As people know, when your commander is a planeswalker, it's a lot easier to keep them off the battlefield through combat. This being a bit of redundancy is really, really good, and it helps you set up into a board that you can then destroy all lanes with very, very profitably. And I will argue, for what it's worth, the additional +1/+1 you get for your equipped creatures is not nothing, especially with certain abilities. It can really rack up, certain setups. But I will say, now that I think about it, it does mess with Skull Clamp. So be aware of that. So maybe the suggestion isn't great, but it is something I was just thinking about and I wanted you to think about a little bit. Just mainly as redundancy for your command. All right, let's take a look at a few cards that I'm thinking aren't here. The first one is Colossus Hammer. Yes, yes, this one's pretty obvious. I'm a Hammer Time player. I see Hammer, I want to give to you. But that being said, I do want to give it to you, right? It is a really, really good card. It is very cheap to play, and you have a number of ways to equip it, and it does beat face really, really well. Like, in modern and some other Eternal formats, people see this card and they're like, let's one-shot our opponents. Let's put it on Ink Moth, which, to be fair, I don't actually know if you're playing. I should take a peek at it. Um, you are not, but you could play Ink Moth with this and be pretty happy with that. But, they're like, let's play Ink Moth, let's give it double strike, blah, blah, blah. Here, you can just play it fairly. Just play this on one, play something that equips itself, like Kemba on two, or just, once Nahiri is out, attach a core to it. You have an 11/11 or bigger, and just swing. Don't worry too much about it. It is really, really good post, stacks when everyone is unable to do things. You're able to swing with an 11/11 turn by turn. And I do recognize one of the cards I suggested to take out, the Angel, has Vigilance. And once you have the Orb out, Vigilance is very good, especially with abilities like this. Or attach the Hammer in addition to one of the protection swords, and all of a sudden you've got like 12 additional power that can't be blocked. It just speeds up your game plan, if nothing else. And if nothing else, when you attack an opponent with an 11/11 every turn cycle, they got to start blocking. And you're probably not attacking the player with a bunch of tokens, so you are forcing them to start. You're playing the abyss against one opponent, if that makes sense. Every turn they have to sacrifice a creature, basically, and that's a pretty good deal, I would say, for a really easy to cast, really easy to keep in play card. So I do recommend this. The other two cards, the equipment cards, I do suggest are sort of the Animus, because this is just bonus ramp. I do really like it, and you have a lot of different ways, to ramp when you're behind. This always ramps, and I do really like this. Or the newer version of it, which is Bitter Thorn Nissa's Animus, which is the living weapon version. Both of these work identically. Both of them are really good. Play them, turn them sideways, ramp. They get really, really good after you've blown up all the lands, but otherwise are generically just good in general. Let's see. I had one more. I had a Mithril Coat, but I just keep seeing this card around, and I get that it can be strong, but I don't know to what degree. For certain setups, it can be really, really good, like on certain of your I'm looking like being able to put it on Dryad Magistrate or being able to put it on, I don't know, Halvar or El Schnorn or something, or Linvala especially, can be really, really good. But it's just okay some of the time, so I'll leave that for you to decide. I do have one more equipment, and it is Bloodforged Battle Axe. I don't know if this is good. I think this can be really, really good after the what would you call it? After the board wipe or after the situation where you're just ahead and everyone's locked out of the game, because it just generates its own token every single turn. And this card used to be really, really expensive. I do like that it's gotten cheaper. That is a weird promo. But even that being said, I think it's okay. It's cool in the way that it makes all of your cores at least 3/1s, because every time you hit with one, you're almost guaranteed to get an extra one of these a turn usually. And with that in mind, your cores always will have something to attach themselves to, and I think that can be good. And then you can stack all of these onto one creature to hit for a very, very hard, amount of damage. But that's neither here nor there. It is a card advantage, spell, just not in the way we expect. It just allows yourself to get more permanents in play and do more things with them. Really, really bad with Kataki, though, of course. Then, few more stacks. I'm surprised you're not playing Thalia. I get that it interferes with your commander, but you seem so keen on playing stacks cards that interfere with your game plan, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. It is a pretty good way of playing, these kind of creatures. But with that in mind, Thalia seems to be kind of a miss here. I think she's just really, really good. She holds equipment really, really well, and she's very good at just kind of like hating on your opponents who require more non-creature spells than you do, especially since you can cheat in a lot of your equipment. I think she's a surefire win. And if not, you should at least consider her 3 mana version, which is, you know, just kind of a better version of, let's see, of blind obedience, if you ask me, because she represents that first text is already there, and she's a 3/2 first strike, which once again holds equipment really, really well. Then let's see. I want to put Crashing Drawbridge in here because I think it's really good in certain setups where you can just tap it, give your team haste, and you do that after equipping, like, you +2, put a core into play, grab an equipment, and then Crashing Drawbridge to attack with it immediately. And I think that's good, but I get that it doesn't go with your game plan otherwise, so I do understand to an extent that it has a limit. And then finally, Brave the Elements is just on my mind. Just kind of a good card that you can use against stuff. All right, I'm gonna finish my assist here. I think that honestly, I think the deck is very good. I get why you feel that the deck is already very strong. I will point to nothing else more than maybe a few extra lands. And I think if I were you, I would definitely play sort of the Animist and Bitterthorn to start with. I think Colossus Hammer could be really cool, but I'll leave that to you. Outside of that, I think the deck doesn't require that many changes. I do recommend going up in lands. But after that, the deck seems really solid. Yeah, I think there could be an argument made that if you ever wanted to, you could switch one to one of the new red white Nissa, I believe is a creature, and you can use her as your commander. And then you can think about adding red and having the same kind of theme. But this isn't a theme deck, this is a Stax deck, right? So I don't think that's the direction you'd want to go into, but there would be some benefits to adding red. You'd have access to Blood Moon, among other things. Anyways, I hope this video was helpful to you. If you have another draft of this deck or any deck, you can submit it to me through a form that is in a link in the video description below. And if you want your deck to be the next one I look at, there is a link there too. And if you could like, comment, subscribe, do the whole YouTube thing, I'd be very, very grateful. The channel is still growing, and any attention we can put on it is a good thing. Thank you so much for submitting your deck, and good luck with improving it.